Good evening. I'm Heather Cordy, Superintendent of the Sherwood School District, and on behalf of our Board of Directors and our administrative team, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, we're excited to share with you the hard work that the teams all across the district have been involved in all summer. And before I go any further, I do want to thank staff and members of the core planning teams who have dedicated so many hours and their energy to creating models and then adjusting models based on changing guidance and always thinking about our students first. So a couple of technical next steps before we talk more about the forum. Tomorrow evening, Wednesday, August 12th, we will be meeting with our board of directors to further discuss these instructional models. That work session will be live streamed and will take place from 4 to 6:30 p.m. And our regular board meeting will start at 7 and it will also be live streamed. Also, our comprehensive distance learning blueprint, CDL blueprint, is due to the Oregon Department of Education by August 17th. And districts all across Oregon have been working with the Oregon Department of Education all summer. And we know that they expect that adjustments will likely be made to the models up until the first day of school and perhaps beyond, depending on the feedback that we receive and our ability to monitor and adjust. And I just share that with you just in order to emphasize the importance of your feedback and how much we value it and look forward to receiving it. So recently, after the governor released the metrics that will guide when districts will be able to conduct in-person learning, we shared with you that we will be in the comprehensive distance learning model for the first 9 weeks, noting that if the numbers decrease and the metrics are attained, that then we will adjust accordingly. So to that end, our focus this evening is to share with you those 3 instructional models: comprehensive distance learning, which is how we will be starting the school year until metrics are met; the hybrid model, which will eventually allow in-person instruction; and a third model that will be available that is fully online with Sherwood School District staff and curriculum and students. And you'll hear all about those models and their interconnectedness during this evening's presentation. For the first half of the forum, you will hear from Assistant Superintendent Gary Bennett and Principal Melissa Barron as they discuss guidance and the elements of the models. And as an aside, our team has been doing a lot of work preparing our buildings for in-person instruction for when that time comes. Sanitation protocols, ventilation, protective shields, and the list goes on. Those things are not being addressed this evening. We will focus on those facilities related elements when we meet with the board later this month. So back to the forum. The second half will be a moderated question and answer session, and you will see early on in the slide deck how you can submit your questions electronically. Our moderator will be extracting those questions and asking them of our panel later in the evening. We likely won't have time to address all of the questions posed tonight, and we do intend to follow up with additional information in the days and weeks to come. Additionally, we'll be sending out a feedback survey tomorrow on Wednesday, where we will ask for your input on the models presented tonight. Last and certainly not least, before the presentation begins, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and truly honor how difficult last spring was. We know distance learning model used in the spring wasn't perfect, despite a ton of hard work, innovation, and responsiveness on the part of all of our staff. There were so many challenges and unexpected curveballs. Everyone worked to support our students. All of us, students, staff, and families, were thrown into an impossible situation with very little time to respond. Parents were basically asked to assume the role of student teachers, and staff were asked to teach in ways they've never done before, that we've never even had to talk about. Tonight, you'll hear principals talking specifically about lessons learned from the spring and how CDL will look different this fall. In closing, we are thankful for your partnership all the time, and most certainly during these challenging times. I thank you for your grace, your patience, and your kindness as we work hard to do the very best for our students. Mr. Bennett will now begin the formal presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Cordy. My name is Gary Bennett. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of the Sherwood School District. Excited to share with you tonight some of our plans for fall of 2020. I will start with sort of a district and a state level overview. As Dr. Cordy said, that will be followed by Principal Melissa Barron sharing some specifics about the high school plan. Next, please. The Oregon Department of Education and the Oregon Health Authority have released lots of guidance for what schools will look like when they open in person and what they'll look like in comprehensive distance learning. That guidance has been coming out all summer long. In fact, another large set of guidance came out today that included lots of guidance on general education, as well as some of the most specific guidance we've seen yet around special education. Some of that information is not included in this presentation because we just didn't have it available to us. In addition to learning about the guidance, you'll get to learn about Sherwood High School's plan for online and in-person models, which would be a hybrid model. Most importantly, you'll have an opportunity to give us feedback through the survey that Dr. Cordy mentioned, and you can use the bit.ly at the bottom of the screen to present questions to us that we will answer in the course of the forum. Next, please. On July 28th, the governor provided some metrics that directed whether or not schools could open for in-person instruction in the fall of 2020. There were two sets of metrics to be met, one at the county level and one at the state level. For the county metric to be met, there had to be less than 10 cases per 100,000 people in the preceding 7 days, and less than 5% of those tested have to actually test positive. And at the state level, there also has to be less than 5% testing positive over the preceding 7 days, and both of those metrics have to be made 3 weeks in a row. Based on where we are as a county right now, we do not meet those metrics, and that's why Dr. Cordy suggested we will be opening in comprehensive distance learning for all schools in our district. Just to put these metrics in perspective, for the week ending August 10th, Washington County had 43 cases per 100,000 people and a 5.5% positivity rate, 5.6%, I apologize. The week before, there were 54 cases per 100,000 and a 5.9% rate. So a bit of distance to go before we meet these metrics. Next, please. Realizing that some student groups are less able to learn remotely than others, the governor made some exceptions to her order. One of the major exceptions was for students in grades K3. For all students to return to campus, we need to see fewer than 10 cases per 100,000. That number rises to 30 per 100,000 for K3 students, a significantly easier metric to attain. Part of the reason she did that is because younger students get the virus at lower rates. They get less sick when they get COVID-19, and they seem to spread the virus less than older children or adults. Younger students also need access to in-person instruction to build those important literacy and numeracy skills, and also social skills they'll need for success in school and later in life. More relevant to the high school level, the governor also made exceptions for students in certain career and technical education courses and students who need extra support, such as students experiencing disabilities and others. Sherwood has not made any definitive plans around which groups might return to school when these metrics are met, but we're excited for this guidance and for these opportunities. Next, please. As we were preparing for the fall, we looked at really three models, all of which are related and two of which work in concert with one another. The two that work in concert with one another are the hybrid model, which is our model for in-person learning and staggered schedules with alternating remote learning and in-person learning. And that will happen when schools are allowed to open. Closely paired with that is the comprehensive distance learning model. And that is an interim model of distance learning until schools can open for in-person instruction. Those two systems work hand in hand to allow for smooth transitions from comprehensive distance learning into a hybrid model when schools are allowed to open, and should case rates worsen, allow us to move back into distance learning in a seamless transition for students, or a relatively seamless transition for students. We're also very excited to announce the opening of the Sherwood Cloud Campus. This option allows students to learn from home online year-long, even when schools open, for families who choose that. This slide really serves to compare the three models and show how they relate together. The next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the Sherwood Cloud Campus. One thing that's important to note, though, under all of these instructional models, Students will have the opportunity to learn the same content, whether they're home and in person. They'll stay connected to their neighborhood peers and neighborhood schools and stay connected to their peers. And we think this is a really exciting option for our students who feel safest learning at home, regardless of whether school is open or when school is open. Next, please. The Sherwood Cloud Campus, as I talked about, is the fully online model. It's available for all students. The curriculum will be tightly aligned with what's happening in Sherwood schools on a regular basis, and that will allow students to return easily back to in-person school, while right back into our Sherwood classes, right back into our schedule when the pandemic comes to its conclusion. Families will be asked to register for this model to allow for proper planning and staffing. Look for that registration to come out in the next couple of days. Also, it's worth noting that families choosing this option will be able to switch out of the hybrid into the hybrid model and out of the Sherwood Cloud Campus at the end of grading periods during the course of the school year, provided there is room in the hybrid model with physical capacity for students where we can still maintain social distancing. But we are intending it not to be a model where if students choose, they're there permanently, but we would like some flexibility. However, the comprehensive distance learning will move smoothly back and forth between the two should schools open. Next, please. When we surveyed the community in the spring around what they thought about distance learning in the spring, it largely mirrored the guidance we received from the Oregon Department of Education. It seems that all of us were on the same page about about some things that needed to change. Some things that is in the guidance, and you'll see in our programs for distance learning and the Sherwood Cloud Campus, is regular live instruction every day for all kids, peer interactions, more consistent feedback and attention to mental health, a structured schedule, and just in general, more instructional time and more rigor. And we think these things are important, and we're excited about these things. And although our teams worked really hard in the spring to develop a plan on really short notice, teachers worked really hard to implement that plan. Having had the benefit of the opportunity to learn from spring, a summer to plan, and having adequate time to train teachers, we're excited to be able to put in place a much stronger model as we move into fall of 2020. On that, I'll turn it over to the Sherwood High School principal, Melissa Barron, to talk about some things happening at the high school.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Hi, everyone. This is Melissa Barron, principal at Sherwood High School, and I am excited to be here with you tonight and to be able to share some of our plans for the future. With me to help during the question and answer period are two of our associate principals, Katie Voss and Scott Haddon. And so, like I said, we're happy to be here tonight. As we start to dive into this presentation of information, it's really important for me to start with why. Why did we make the decisions that we did? How did we end up where we are? And there are some guiding principles and priorities that we landed on really early on in this process. We started planning for the fall, I think probably before the end of the school year even occurred last year. And we pulled together about 35 of our staff and faculty who volunteered to be a part of what we call the Vision Project. And we really dove into this design thinking for educators and thought about this as an opportunity that we have been waiting for a long time. We as educators know that the system that we currently operate in hasn't always worked for every student. And so we chose to just flip everything on its head and start to think about this in a positive way, even though we know with that came a lot of challenges. And so what you see on the screen are our guiding principles, and where we landed on, I mean, if I can theme them in a particular way, was one, thinking about how we provide and create a system that serves every student to the best of our ability. So equity, thinking and knowing that not every student needs the same thing. And so how can we make sure that we meet those needs? We talked about community and connection. One of the things that makes Sherwood School District and Sherwood High School what it is our belief in each other and how we connect to one another as human beings. And so that was something that we recognized 100% in the spring was one of our biggest challenges, is that we lost a lot of the sense of what made us who we are. And so as we were looking through planning, that was something that was at the forefront of our mind. And then we wanted to provide consistency. And we know that in the spring, on March 13th, we closed schools down for what ended up being the rest of the year. And at the high school level in particular, we were forced to make a lot of decisions in order to meet graduation requirements and providing the right credits and all of those sorts of things that caused us to change a lot of our course offerings midstream because we couldn't offer the same things that we were offering while we were in the building. And so what we are trying to plan for right now is consistency. We don't want to get in that same position again. And so as you're listening to the rest of our presentation, just remember, like, we're trying to plan for all students and making sure that they're successful, providing consistency, and then making sure that we are doing a good job of supporting what it means to be Sherwood High School as a community. Next, please. So lessons learned from spring of 2020. I echo a lot of what Dr. Cordy and Mr. Bennett said in terms of what happened in the spring. I've been doing a lot of thinking and a lot of reading about what was occurring and how we responded as a system. And something that has stuck out to me a lot is this idea that what we did in the spring was crisis teaching. And that was totally different than what we are planning for this fall. And so we were trying to do the best that we could, and we fully recognized that there were places that we misstepped and that we could have done a better job. And so, like I said, I echo what Mr. Bennett and Dr. Cordy mentioned, that we, with the planning and with the involvement of a lot more people in the conversation, we're poised to do some really great things for our students this year. You can see the lessons that we learned, but like I said, the positive lesson, and I think the thing that stands out to me the most, is the resilience of the people involved in our district, and from kids and families to teachers and staff. We were all asked to do something that we never saw coming. I was talking with some people about I remember that week of March like it was yesterday. And we started on a Monday and thought everything was great. The weather was really sunny. We were starting a new trimester at the high school. And then by Friday, we were closing down school. And so what happened and how we progressed through the spring just demonstrated to me how resilient our community is, and something that I'm just so proud of being a part of. In terms of instruction and where we've spent a lot of our time in the planning and preparing for this fall, is that good teaching is good teaching. And what we're trying to accomplish is this understanding that the best practices that we employ in a brick and mortar classroom, we need to employ in a virtual classroom. And so that is a big lesson learned, that we have to increase per the guidance, but also because we know what it's the right thing to do, we have to increase our synchronous learning, or that live interaction with teachers. And that came through loud and clear in our feedback from the community, as well as from our staff and from our students. And then Canvas use. And so at the high school level, we had implemented Canvas a couple of years ago, and with varying levels of use and consistency. And something that we have been really mindful of as we're planning for this fall is that there needs to be consistency. It has to be clear. We have to utilize the learning management system in the same way. And so that is something that we are really focused on moving forward. Next, please. So as I start to talk about our system as a whole, it was really, like I said, and have said multiple times and will continue to say, consistency is one of our big priorities. And so there are two variables that we have in our proposed system, and that is, one, whether or not we are on campus, and the second one is the amount of time that's spent engaged in teacher facilitated learning. And so I'll explain those in a little bit more detail, but again, if we go back to those priorities, consistency was one of them. And so that's why we have just those two limited variables. We at the high school level are proposing a move to the quarter system for the 2021 school year. And there are several pieces of rationale around that. And what that means is that we currently operated on a trimester system, so 3 specific chunks of grading time that were 12 weeks. And what we're looking at moving to is a quarter system, which is 9 weeks, 4 times. And in order for us to have a system that we can seamlessly move in and out of a hybrid, so having students in the building and also doing comprehensive distance learning, we needed to provide more course offerings, or more spots, credit opportunities is what we call them, in order to accomplish that. And so that is our sole rationale, is that us moving to a quarter system allows us to drive class sizes down to under 25, almost under 20 in most cases, and still offer all of the same electives and all the same core classes and all the same AP and dual credit courses that we have in our course catalog, and have the numbers be low enough so that we can, again, move back and forth between this comprehensive distance learning model and the hybrid model, which is what we've been called to do. In order to accomplish this, we are breaking the school up into 3 houses is the word that we're using to describe them. And right now it's just house 1, house 2, and house 3, but we're working with our leadership students to come up with some better titles for those so that they can align with our community. But all students will be broken up into these houses, and they will rotate in on a 3-week cycle. And I'll explain that on the next slide. House assignments will be decided based off of forecasting that we did in the spring. And so if you remember, we asked students for course selections prior to the pandemic and the shutdown. And then we asked again for updated course information sometime in April or May-ish. And so that is how we're putting students into courses and into houses, is based off of their elective selections that they made in the spring. Some things just to keep in mind that I think are important information around us, this shift to the quarter system, is that most of our AP and dual credit courses will run through 4 quarters. And so what that ends up meaning is that there is a potential that students are going to need to make a choice between electives, because there are now only 4 opportunities or 4 spots in the schedule. And so that is something that as you're working through and thinking through things, just to keep in mind. Also know that our graduation requirements are going to remain the same at 28 credits. And because we're in the quarter system, that does mean that we'll have additional opportunities for students to earn credit. And that's something that we're gonna work through and have a better explanation for exactly what the long-term implications are for this particular year. Next, please. So the schedule in our comprehensive distance learning model is outlined on the right side of this slide. And this is for students. And something that, again, came through loud and clear in our feedback was around the idea that 5 courses, which is what we had in the trimester system, was too much to balance. There was too much going on, too much homework, too much time in front of the computer. And so we made the very conscious decision to move to 4 courses in our proposal. And so again, like I said earlier, that means there's a total of 16 credit opportunities as opposed to the 15 credit opportunities in the trimester system. Each course will earn a 0.5 credit. So for each quarter course, 9 weeks will be a 0.5 credit, and all courses will be graded using the A through F traditional grading scale, which is a big shift from the spring and something that we know caused a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress for a lot of families. And so that is something that we're moving back to a more traditional grading scale. Right now, what we're trying to do is balance core classes and elective classes, meaning that each quarter a student would take 2 core classes, language arts and social studies, or math and science, and then 2 elective classes. And there's some flexibility in that, because I know that there are a lot of students who are taking multiple AP courses. And so that would require some flexibility and not have as many of the traditional elective choices that we would call them. But again, it's all going back and coming out of the forecasting information that we received from students in the spring. Additionally to those 4 courses, every student is going to have a homeroom course, and this speaks to that value of community and connection and belonging. We recognize that we need an opportunity for our students to have a connection to an adult in the building. And so we are creating homeroom that will meet every day. It will be virtual in both the comprehensive distance learning model and the hybrid model. And again, the purpose is for us to really build intentional relationship with students, help them feel like they're a part of this smaller community, and help to also address some of the academic supports that we know were lacking in the spring. And so again, this is in response to some of the feedback that we got. And so we want to be really thoughtful and intentional about how we're supporting students academically in the comprehensive distance learning or the hybrid model. And so we will have a homeroom for every student. Next, please. I wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge the Sherwood Cloud Campus, and Mr. Bennett explained that earlier in the presentation, but at the high school level, I just want to make sure that it's very clear to everyone that because we value every student having the opportunity to take every course, the Sherwood Cloud Campus will not operate separate in any way from Sherwood High School. And so if a student or a family elects to have their student enrolled in the Sherwood Cloud Campus, and enroll is very intentionally in quotation marks on the slide, that means that they're going to be learning from home as opposed to learning in the classroom when they're in the comprehensive or in the hybrid model, excuse me. Our classes will be live streamed to those students. And so if I am a student who is enrolled in AP English Literature and I want to be at the Cloud Campus, or I want to remain at home for the entirety of the school year, AP Literature will look the same for me. My assignments will be the same. My interactions will be the same, except for I'll be, virtual as opposed to sitting in the classroom on that time that we're in the hybrid model. Thank you. Next slide. So as we start to think about what comes next, we know that our ultimate goal is to get students back into the building. And Mr. Bennett spoke to the metrics that the state has outlined that are requirements for us to be able to do that. And we want kids in our facility. We all know that we have a beautiful new facility that we can't wait to welcome students and community members into. And so that is something that's at the forefront of our mind, is how do we get students back to the building and into the building as quickly as possible. And it's important that you know that we are taking into consideration and planning for all of the requirements and expectations from the Oregon Health Authority that include things like the physical distancing, hand hygiene. For us, the cohort piece is where we're spending the most of our efforts right now, trying to make sure that our schedule aligns with the cohorting in the future so that, again, we can move very quickly and very seamlessly into a hybrid model when we meet the metrics. Next, please. These are some continuing expectations and requirements. And I know Dr. Cordy talked about how this isn't necessarily the meeting to discuss exactly what those plans are, but please trust that we have put all of the things in place that are necessary in order for us to have students and staff on campus safely when the time comes for when we meet the metrics. We will have face coverings. We have a plan with our custodians around and cleaning and disinfecting. Isolation plans are in place. And so that is something that we're planning for, we're prepared for, we're ready for. One of the luxuries of our new space is that we have space. And so we are able to meet all of those requirements very, I don't say easily, lightly, because none of this is easy, but it is something that we do have a luxury in terms of space and ensuring that when the time comes for us to move on campus, we are prepared for that. Next, please. So the schedule for the hybrid model is outlined on the right-hand side again. And what you'll notice is that there is an extended amount of face-to-face teacher-facilitated learning that occurs when students are on campus. And the rationale behind that is that we believe that when students are face-to-face with instructors, that we need to take as much time as we possibly can. And so that is why we've extended the day longer than what you saw in the distance learning schedule. Because the only variables in our plan are that and whether or not students are on campus, everything else remains the same. So students are automatically and already scheduled into houses. We will let everybody know what the schedule is of when each house is going to be on campus, and that will be a 3-week rotation. And so house 1 will be on campus for the first week that we're allowed back, and then house 2, and then house 3. The other 2 weeks, houses will be in distance learning or comprehensive distance learning. And so it really won't disrupt anything that we already have in place, and teachers are fully aware of how we're going to be planning for all of those sorts of things. And again, with the shift to the quarter system, it really allows us to drive class sizes down to very low in order to meet the requirements for the cohorting. Next, please. So in terms of next steps, as you can imagine at the high school level, one of our biggest tasks and undertakings right now is building this incredibly complex master schedule. And it is because we are attempting to offer everything that we have offered in the past or that we put out in the course catalog or that students forecast for. It's taking us some time to put that together and manipulate students into, not manipulate students, excuse me, but manipulate the system into having different students in different houses and courses in different houses. And so that's something that we're spending a lot of time on right now in order to get that out. And I know that that is a question that continues to come up, is when we're going to get our schedules, and our hope is within the next week and a half or so that we'll be able to publish some schedules and let students know what the next steps are. Additionally, because we also realize that we're doing a lot of change and there are a lot of things that are going to be new, that we need to have a robust plan for professional development for our staff, but also orientation plans for students and families, something that we're spending a lot of time talking about, that one of our associate principals, Adam Mitchell, is working on, is how we are transitioning our 9th grade students into high school in the best way possible. And so watch for information about that, because there are some plans in place about what that's going to look like, and know that that's at the forefront of our mind of how do we help our 9th graders connect to Sherwood High School. We also I believe that one of our values, I know one of our values is building relationship and connection and belonging. And so that means that we need to have some personal contact with everybody. And so we are working on how we're going to connect with all 1,700 students before the start of the school year. And that will probably be utilizing our homeroom structure and our homeroom teachers, and then our counselors and administrators to make some phone calls and try to make sure that we have connected with everybody and answered individual questions to the best of our ability. And so we're planning for that. And then, like I said, we're preparing for our homeroom structure and supports. And so the one thing that I just want to leave you all with is just this knowing and understanding that we are always coming back to the question of how do we create a sense of community, connection, belonging, and consistency, because that's what it means to be Sherwood High School. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Rose to begin the question and answer period of the forum.
Thank you, Principal Barron. We're going to get started right off with the question of when will school start this year?
We are, excuse me, we're currently discussing a start date of September 14th for official instruction, to allow us more time to provide professional development to teachers, and also allow that opportunity for students for teachers to connect with families and students prior to the start of school.
Thank you. Why has Sherwood School District switched to a quarter system?
The rationale behind us shifting to the quarter system is really to help us drive down our numbers in order to meet the requirements for us to move into a hybrid system as seamlessly as possible. And
just a follow up to that, we will be making that recommendation for this year. For grades 6 through 12, and that will be a conversation that we have with our board tomorrow evening, and recommending maintaining the trimester system at the elementary.
With the necessity of online activity, what steps are being taken to provide transparency of the lessons and lesson plans to the parents so that we can ensure that our kids are staying on task?
Yeah, our investment into Canvas as a learning management system school-wide and 6 through 12 wide is a critical piece of this, giving families access to what's going on in the student's daily schedule and daily lessons. There's a parent portal for Canvas that all parents can have access to, and they can take a peek at the activities and assignments their students are engaging in. And Parent View is also another tool that gives us an avenue to share grades and feedback with parents as well.
Will IEP and 504 children have a chance to have additional supports in person?
Yes, this year we will be, we looked at a lot of feedback from our parents, and we recognize how difficult last spring was for many of our families. This year we plan to have much more live instruction between teachers and students, and peer-to-peer interactions.
Are the metrics based on number of cases in our district, Sherwood, or the county, Washington, or some other grouping? If numbers go up and down, will we move fluidly back and forth between in-person classes back to at-home distance learning for a time until cases go back down?
The cases that we are looking at are in Washington County. What the county that the school district resides in is the metrics that you need to look at. So that for us is largely Washington County with a few students from Clackamas County. There are metrics out there that give us a heads up that if we were in a hybrid model and cases rise, and this guidance, this detailed guidance just came out today, and I don't want to quote the numbers because I don't want to misquote them, but there is guidance in there that gives us specific, if numbers start to creep up and they hit a certain point, you need to start making plans to go back to comprehensive distance learning. And if you're in comprehensive distance learning and the numbers start to fall, then you should start planning to move into a hybrid. But there are specific numbers that guide our direction on that in that way.
Thank you. Do you expect that the October SAT hosted by Sherwood High School will continue as planned?
We are not currently sure how that will look for the ACT, but have continued to host conversations with the Oregon Department of Education on what their recommendation is for the October ACT.
We heard in the middle school presentation that we are looking at a start date of September 14th that was discussed here. Will that move our last day or graduation?
We have some flexibility around that, and that is going to be a key piece of the conversation again with the board tomorrow when we take an adjusted calendar to them and host that conversation.
If students don't feel comfortable learning a class online, can they forecast for a different one?
So part of our plan for when we're reaching out to students independently and individually, families, will be to have that conversation, ask that question about changing particular course offerings given our current situation.
What will be the best way for juniors and seniors to stay on track for visiting and applying to colleges and to stay up to date with scholarship opportunities?
That's a great question. Something that we've been working on and working through is trying to figure out exactly what the future is going to hold in terms of college. And that's another landscape that's ever changing. And so we do have a dedicated person on our staff, Shannon Cleveland, who serves as our college and career director. And so she is working with our counseling department to figure out how to best support the needs of students as they're preparing for their future.
What happens with courses or electives that require on-site instruction, labs, gym use, teacher assistant? And in following, since electives offered may change, will students have the opportunity to adjust their electives they wish to take?
I'll answer that one. We are moving through, it's not changing electives. So electives aren't going to change at this point. We're offering everything that we have. So yes, they'll have the opportunity to make a change if need be. And then Jim, can you repeat the first question, the first part of the question? Sorry.
What happens with courses or electives that require on-site instruction, like labs, gym use, teacher assistant?
So Mr. Bennett addressed this in his part of the presentation. The governor has made some exceptions to allowing certain groups of students on campus at certain points in time. And so we're working to explore and get clarification about which of our courses and which of our student populations that would apply to.
Can students switch from the hybrid model when it becomes available to the Sherwood Cloud campus?
I would think that was a shift that students could make. We hadn't talked about that explicitly, but I see no reason why we wouldn't be able to have students make that shift.
How will students know what their confirmed classes are?
We'll be releasing the schedules in Student View when they're available.
Thank you. A student forecasted for a course, Calculus BC, that may or may not have been offered on-site at SHS. If not offered on-site, he would have been required to go to PCC to take the course. What will happen with a course like this?
We're still working with PCC and offering Extended Options Program, the EOP program. And so we will be addressing that closer to the start of the school year in those conversations, all of our students who are enrolled in EOP.
I have a senior and an 8th grade student. When we go to the hybrid model with the district, will the district try to have students in one family going to school on the same day rotation schedule?
The models at the middle school and high school, the middle school is on a 1 week on, 1 week off schedule, and the high school is on a 1 week on and 2 week at home schedule, not off. 1 week at school, 1 week at home. And so those schedules won't be able to align every week. They'll align once every 6 weeks. They'll have the same week off, I think, if my math is correct.
Here's a multi-part question about electives. First, when will students be informed of their electives? And what is the plan so students can still benefit from electives during CDL and in person when it is safe? How will electives work if we have to bounce between the two systems?
So students will know their electives as soon as we release the schedules in hopefully the next couple of weeks. How will we balance the CDL with electives? And my answer for that is that we believe in our teachers, and our teachers are working right now to plan what the curriculum and how the instruction is going to go in both the CDL and the hybrid model. For our CTE courses in particular, we are working to figure out, like we said, what the opportunity is going to be to get students on campus in smaller groups to do the hands-on work that's necessary.
Principal Barron mentioned EOP classes. Can you explain what that acronym is for, and then how you will handle dual credit and EOP classes?
Sure. Yeah, it's the expanded options program that we run through PCC for courses that we don't offer at the high school. Students will have a process that they'll go through with their counselor, and you will work individually with your respective counselor, which will be by Alpha this year, to sign up for EOP.
Thank you. Can you clarify how many hours the school day will be? During each day, when will students be required to check in?
I'm assuming that means in the online model. And so we're planning on having about 45 minutes of time where the student will be responsible for checking in with the teacher synchronously, in the first 30 minutes of the class, and then will be asynchronous, and there will be breaks built in between those times. So they'll have specific times where they can take some time off of the screen as well.
To build on that, the total amount of time we're looking at classes being offered is between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. With an hour of office hours at the end of every day while we're in the comprehensive distance learning model.
If a student needs to retake a class because they were not successful in meeting criteria for passing, for example, TRIG, how will students take that course again? Will there be additional support so the class can be passed this time around?
We would handle that just as we would. If a student needs to retake a course, then we would offer the course the same way that we would in the past. It's just that this time it's going to be in a virtual setting to start the school year. And so will there be additional supports? Yes. We constantly are working to figure out how to best intervene and support students. And so we will continue to do our best to make sure that students are learning the content.
Thank you. Students are required to have a specific amount of seat time as set by the ODE. With CDL and hybrid model, has that changed? And if not, will some days scheduled for PD, work days, or vacations be revisited?
We are required to meet the same instructional hours that we were prior to going into comprehensive distance learning or hybrid. There's a couple changes though. For one, we're normally allowed 30 hours of professional development for our staff to count towards those instructional hours. This year that has increased to 90 hours. I believe the number is 90 hours, but it could be less than that. And so that's a change. The other change is that time looks differently. In the guidance provided by ODE, there's a requirement for teacher facilitated learning time. And then there's what they call applied learning time. And together you add those together and it has to equal to the same 990 hours we had to hit for the state requirements prior to that. It just looks a little bit different. And some of that teacher facilitated learning time, that's a lot of the instruction that Mr. Haddon was just referring to, where teachers are working with kids directly. And in classroom settings, the applied learning could look like office hours, could look like small group setting, could be independent practice, could be kids working together on a project, but the hours need to be the same. They just look a little bit different in this model.
When will the course offering catalog be released?
I'm assuming it's referencing schedules, which will be within the next couple of weeks. The course offering catalog is live on our website. And so that's just what we use to have students select courses in order to make a schedule. And that's currently available on the website.
Okay. How can my student who will be a senior interact as needed with his counselor regarding college applications, et cetera?
That's something that we're still working on and figuring out how to best support students as they're planning for their future. And so our counselors return to work next week. And so we will be engaging in that conversation and we'll get an answer out as quickly as we can.
Here's a question regarding credits. To clarify, since each course is half a credit, students would take a core class 2 quarters each year to earn 1 credit. Is that correct? And then most AP and dual credit would be 4 quarters.
That's correct. And so that is one of those implications that we're working through to think about and how to best manage is that there are students taking AP courses in particular are going to earn 2 full credits for taking 1 year of a course.
How will kids be assigned a homeroom class? And how many kids will be in each class?
Students will be assigned to a homeroom class based off of grade level and the teachers that are in a particular house and how many students we're hoping between 17 and 20.
Okay. Are you taking, recording, and verifying attendance, especially in the distance learning models?
Yeah, we'll be taking attendance in the distance learning model and checking in with kids that don't engage in the synchronous learning part of the classes.
Have you found a way to safely offer choir and band?
Currently, we are looking, we operate in the comprehensive distance learning model. We're working with Mr. Stein, Ms. Shukro almost daily about what the plan is going to be for when we move into the hybrid model. Right now, we're planning to utilize outside space, and that's something that is manageable, but we're working to finalize plans of exactly what that will look like in the hybrid model.
Will classes be taught with live interactions with the classroom teacher, or is the only interactions during homeroom or office hours?
Classes will have live interaction daily with students.
Will the curriculum be the same for all kids in the same grade within the school, or will it differ by teacher as it did in the spring?
We recognize that that was a challenge for a lot of families. And so part of our work this fall will be helping our teachers align their curriculum more closely. There will be a part of it that still there's some autonomy for our teachers in terms of teaching content, but in terms of standards and instruction, those will be aligned.
Will fewer elective classes affect students' ability to receive an advanced honors diploma?
No.
Are students with disabilities on IEPs who are unable to learn through distance learning exempt from the 1 week on, 2 week off schedule? And are they able to attend on-campus learning prior to meeting the governor's metrics?
So just today, ODE provided some guidance, and we understand that for certain students with disabilities, the online setting is very challenging. So ODE suggests first trying for every student to work with families to be successful with the comprehensive distance learning model, and then track progress as we do in special education very closely. And based on the data, we'll meet with individual IEP teams to determine the best course of action for each student. And of course, the safest course of action for all students.
What will the maximum class size be, or is there a limit established to keep safe distance?
Maximum class size will be 24.
For when the students go back to school, will there be opportunities to get some sort of tour?
We are working diligently on how to offer our community the opportunity to see the new high school. And I know our high school team is thinking about what that will look like for our students as well. So yes, and we are still working on those plans.
Will Cloud Campus students also be assigned to a house?
Yes, by nature of how the courses will be spread out, yes, they'll be assigned to a house.
How will our seniors know if they have met all the graduation requirements, as many classes were canceled in the spring and we have no idea what will be offered in the fall, and then if what they forecasted for will even give them enough credits?
Part of our counselors' work when they return is around reviewing every student's transcript and making sure that all students are on track for graduation. And so part of, again, that conversation that will be occurring with every family will speak to graduation requirements and making sure everyone's on track.
Is the high school having grades A through F, or is it pass, no pass?
Grades are A through F.
Will students have the option to take more classes than 4 per quarter?
That's something that we're still exploring. We believe that that's going to be a possibility, but we're not finished with our schedule yet, and so I can't answer definitively.
Okay. Any thoughts on families with multiple children that reside rurally and have slow or limited Wi-Fi speed and no other choice of providers?
In the guidance that was released earlier today, we know that we're learning there are going to be more exceptions for the groups of students that might be able to come on site earlier, depending on the metrics. So we have a lot of studying to do to read and learn about the specifics of that guidance that was released today. But we do think that there might be a path forward to offer supports for those families with connectivity issues, especially out in rural areas.
How will parents be able to make any needed class schedule changes, especially with the shift from a trimester schedule to a quarterly schedule, once their student gets their new schedule?
We will work directly through our counseling staff to have those conversations with families and students about needs. And then we'll do our best to meet all of those needs. But I also think it's important to know that we also have to be very mindful of the numbers and the cohorts. And so we won't have infinite flexibility in terms of how we are shifting schedules around, because we do have to maintain those requirements outlined by the state.
Will there be ways for students to reach out if they need support emotionally or with concerns?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we worked on very diligently as a staff in the spring, was reaching out to students that we didn't see online regularly, that we didn't see that were logging in on a regular basis, whether that's phone calls or emails or getting students the help that they need. So we're excited to have a team that's going to be working on specifically on that at the high school. And there will be information coming out about how we're going to do that as school starts.
Will the teachers be using the Zoom platform for the online class time? If not, what platform will be the virtual class time?
Yes, students will be accessing Zoom for the online live streamed portion of classes.
Will homeroom classes include the same students as advisory classes did last year, sorted alphabetically?
At this time, we don't anticipate that it will be the same.
What happens if a student is unable to log on at a specific time due to Wi-Fi issues or something else with his or her family?
The plan right now is to have courses recorded, lessons recorded, and or support provided asynchronously to students or during office hours.
Are there any metrics that allow for students to return to in-person instruction full-time, or will they always be in houses and rotate for the entire school year?
The metrics around social distancing require us to keep 35 square feet of space per student in any space the students are in. And we simply don't have the staff and the space to bring every student back on campus at the same time and meet those requirements. And so as long as we are in the current pandemic and these current rules apply, it will be a real challenge to bring all students, especially at the high school level, onto campus 5 days a week.
Thank you. What is the difference between cohorts and houses?
There isn't necessarily a difference. It's just trying to explain how we're separating the school into 3 separate houses, 3 different separate groups. But we could also use the word cohort. It's just that with cohorting, that's how we're speaking about the smaller groups of students, the 100 students within a house, which is going to be close to 600 or 700.
Thank you. What if my course load is more than the 16 openings? I have 3 AP courses plus Spanish 2, English, and health, all required.
That's going to be a conversation with the counselor individually about how to make a plan moving forward, because the reality is that we just can't offer everything that we offered in the non-pandemic world. And so we're going to have to make some choices and make sure that we have a very clear path to graduation that may require some shifting of classes and when you're taking them and those kinds of things.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. During comprehensive distance learning, students are required to be online then for the school day from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. with some breaks built in. Are the recordings of classes if they miss a certain time frame?
Yes, there will be.
Great, thank you. Thank you first to all of those on the panel. We appreciate your time for answering all of those questions. We appreciate our community members who joined us on YouTube, and we will continue to try to answer your questions in the coming days and weeks. But for this evening, that is all, and we thank you very much and good night.